What is your most traumatic experience with a teacher? My 4th grade teacher had a reputation for making one boy in her class an unpopular scapegoat each year. Lucky me, in previous years I'd been just another kid in the playground, but within 2 months the other kids wouldn't play with me during recess. One day I refused to go outside for recess. She asked why, and I foolishly told her that the other kids didn't like me. When they came back in, she marched me to the front of the class and asked for a show of hands. Who didn't like me? 4th grade kids, mostly, did what 4th grade kids do. I broke down that night and told my mom what had happened and what had been going on all along. She marched into school the next day, got a beating that included the principal, and tore the teacher a new butthole. I was still stuck in that class, but the teacher moved on to a new victim. Funny thing how self-esteem influences academic performance. My school used to give us a Stanford Binet IQ test every year. My score dropped 10 points from 3rd to 4th grade, then rose 20 points in 5th grade when I had a nurturing teacher. If you are still alive, frick you, Mrs. Erickson. For an Erickson, she should really try to understand Erickson's theory of development. That would have reminded her that accomplishing things and receiving praise helps students grow. I was bullied really bad. Kids kept drawing awful ugly photos and leaving them on my desk with profanity towards my appearance. I had enough one day after dealing with a lot of abuse at home and the bullying at school, and when I saw another broke down crying and brought it to my teacher. She just grabbed it, looked and asked if I wanted it back. Did nothing to help. Wouldn't listen to me about the constant bullying and did absolutely nothing. I was in 7th grade and still remember it to this day. I'm so sorry. Frick that teacher and frick those bullies. Mine is more of a light-hearted traumatic. In 4th grade I collected Yu-Gi-Oh cards and I had gotten the, at the time, new 3 Egyptian god cards. Well, I was caught playing with them during class and my teacher took them from me and threw them out. I was devastated after all the packs opened and cards traded to acquire them. I never forgave her. Did they ever end up being worth anything before all the reprint boxes? I would have loved to see her face if she found out they were worth some coin. This is like when Weevil threw Yuji's Exodia cards into the ocean. Teacher told me I was a liar to the whole class as she didn't believe my grandmother was a World War I evacuee. She refused to believe me as she assumed my mum was younger than she looked at the time, and therefore my grandmother was younger as well. She thought my mum was in her late 20s when in reality she was in her early 40s at the time. Didn't traumatize me personally, but I had a first year lecturer in classics who went out of his way to terrorize the class. His first words to us were, "I suspect as many as half of you cannot read." He then administered a test, which 2/3 of the class failed. He was not shy about voicing his rather gleeful displeasure. I did well enough to avoid his wrath and, annoyingly, get singled out for praise. He would routinely throw questions at students who weren't paying rigorous attention in a 3-hour lecture on Friday morning, and then berate them for not knowing the answers. His comments on papers were beyond stringent. "Are you illiterate? Do you imagine this makes sense? This is childish," etc. The unfortunate part is that he was a superb classicist. A close second was a novelist turned writing prof who hurled a girl's manuscript out of his office door, nearly hitting me in the hall. As he shouted, "This is not writing," she came out to pick up her magnus opus moments later, weeping. Great writer, self-confessed crap teacher. My favorite teacher in middle school was arrested for child pornography. He wasn't my favorite after that. He also wasn't my teacher after that. During quiet reading time, teacher brought me to front of the class because I was reading a book for girls, and he asked me, "Why are you reading a G.I. Rules book? Are you a girl?" Then made me choose a book for boys to read. I was maybe 10 or 11. The book was Matilda, by the way. Fitting. Got accused of plagiarism over a paper I wrote, and didn't plagiarize. That I was really excited about because of how well I thought I did on it. Enthusiasm fully destroyed. I said that the dot over the I or J is called a tittle. She said it's not a tittle, it's a dot. And with that, she accused me of being impertinent. Technically it was the vice principal, but the day my brother died, apparently he thought it would be a good idea to walk in on story time. The teacher was reading to the class, set me on his lap and tell me in front of everyone that my brother committed suicide. Dude, what a freak. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I got into a shouting match with my band director before a marching band competition in another state. He had anger issues and the fight was over him calling me out in front of everyone for messing up my saxophone solo the week before. There was no one else around to see or hear the shouting. He never said so much as a word to me for the remainder of my time in high school and I was perfectly fine with it. In 5th grade I would often become sick to my stomach and cry for hours. Later in life found out that these were panic attacks. My teacher spanked me with a bungee cord until I stopped crying. I still resent her and my parents for that. Spanked me with a bungee cord until I stopped crying. Do people have brains or no? Because doing something that will probably make a problem worse doesn't usually solve said problem. One time I was on my period and I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom multiple times. She refused to let me go. Eventually I stained my uniform in the chair. I was so embarrassed that I started crying. When my mother found out, she made the school fire that mother. Good going, Ma. Glad she stood up for you. The girls in our elementary school were given proto-adult ed before the boys. The basic puberty stuff. Your body is starting to change. You might develop breasts, sweating, all that stuff. They made a hoo-hoo stupid deal about keeping it quiet. It's the girl's little secret. Don't go spreading it around school. It only occurs to me now that that is kinda dangerous in the wider scope of things. Anyway, my best friend was a boy and naturally, I skipped right off to tell him why suddenly half the class had an assembly all by themselves. My teacher heard about it, got me alone, grabbed me by both arms and shook me. Keep your mouth shut. She was my favorite teacher up till then. Totally a great thing to teach a kid. We had the same talk. They gave us holders for pads but told us to tell boys they were pencil holders. So I said that when asked. I was teased for a long time for saying that it was a pencil holder. Used to love math and science, until I had a teacher in a 6th grade who would bully, mock, and do everything in his power to embarrass me in front of the entire class. I lost all love I had for school after that class. Frick you, Mr. Bright. He doesn't live up to his name, sadly. Not exactly me, but had a teacher yell at one of my friends for not doing his homework and give him a Saturday school, even though his parents had died the night before. Frick that teacher. So when I was in kindergarten I didn't make it to the bathroom in time and wet myself. Went to the nurse's office, got new clothes, but instead of panties I had to wear a pull-up. Not a big deal. I guess it was a school policy for kids my age, I don't really know. When I get back to my class my teacher loudly says, "Oh good, the baby is finally back," or something like that. She also knew about the policy and asked if I was wearing a diaper so every other student could hear. I was 5 and felt a ton of shame and humiliated. I started crying and trying to get out of school a lot because of it. My teacher often referred to me as a baby for the rest of the year. Also, she would constantly ask if I needed to potty or if I was wearing a diaper, like I was a toddler or something. The horrifying thing is that you probably didn't have the social or verbal skills to explain this to your parents and understand it's something that could be stopped. What a horrible teacher. When I was in 2nd grade, my mom died. When I was in 3rd grade, the evil witch of a teacher held me back from recess one day for something. While it was just us in the room, she asked if I went to church. I said no. She then told me that I was going to heck and would never see my mom again. I hated that bee. Says stories are filling me with rage towards some teachers. I know just like any profession there are amazing ones and there are bad ones, but abuse of power is a big issue for me. Had a teacher who hated my dad because he used to trespass onto the facility my dad was a manager of back in the day. Sucker was taking it all on me and was pretty open about it. Not so traumatic, but was a very bad experience for me. My science teacher subtracted 3 points of everyone's grades because he had a bad day. Half of my friends didn't make it to the next year. Had a math teacher that would give pop quizzes in an entirely different math field to all the girls in the class anytime he had a fight with his wife. I was in the 4th grade. Found a dry erase marker on the playground. I wrote my initials on the tire swing. Classmate rats me out. I get yelled at for like 20 minutes straight about vandalism of school property. She starts going off about how it's the first step to becoming a criminal. Being a little kid, this scared the crap out of me. It was probably another 2 years before I believed that I wasn't going to become a criminal as an adult. I accidentally played footsie with a teacher. He was my English teacher and also the baseball coach. The baseball and softball teams traveled together sometimes and somehow we wound up sitting at the same table. Though I was nudging someone else and he said something, I turned beet red. Teacher forced me to handwrite a story, then got mad when I couldn't read it to the class. I have learning disabilities and normally used a school laptop, but she wouldn't let me use it. That's illegal now. If we go against an IEP, we have serious repercussions, or at least we're supposed to. Sadly, not every administration does a good job taking care of their spec ed students. I was talking about the flying squirrels at my grandparents' cabin to a friend and the teacher overheard me. He bellowed out, "There's no such thing as flying squirrels, don't lie just to get people to pay attention to you." 6th grade. I was 11. Hadn't been diagnosed with ADD, now ADHD, yet. The only way I could pay attention in class was if I doodled at the margins of my notes and bounced my legs. My history teacher noticed I did this, and if he caught me he'd rip the page out of my notebook, show it to the class, and marvel at what a bad student and unintelligent person I was, to everyone. Screamed at me because I came in smiling and humming BC it was my birthday, said it was disruptive and I cried on the spot, and now I have burning hatred for that teacher. But hey, she got hit by a car. Don't worry, not a scratch though, just bumped. Glad to hear the car is okay. Being consistently targeted by my teacher. It was endless. Just one thing after the next. He took my crap, went through my crap, punished me extra and targeted me for random bulls. End of the year, we went to outdoor ed camp, 3-day coming of age camp for moving into middle school, and there was a poetry workshop thing. Workshops comprised your whole day. This was a Christian school, and being a Christian and feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, I wrote a poem where the synopsis was, despite my difference to others, I am loved and cherished by God and still hold value. He read it later, and sat me down with my father, calling me suicidal and shaming me for being a disgrace to God and the faith, and was one of many teachers that recommended me for medication and suicide watch. He was later, 5 years, arrested for possession of child pornography. Frick you, Justin. If you really want revenge on that butthole, visit him in jail. Tell him exactly what you and every other decent person in the world really thinks of him. Teacher accused me of stealing artwork I imagined and created myself. She failed me for the quarter. Hands down the best teacher I ever had. Got pulled out mid-class to get arrested for multiple child molestation charges. Computer teacher shamed me into withdrawing from the one programming class the school offered after the first day of it because he said he didn't think I was capable of learning how to program and that other kids more capable couldn't take it because I was filling a spot. I early enrolled while still in high school and had a professor who really made me love politics and law, so I decided that's what I wanted to focus my academic career on. I did well in all of my courses and was setting myself up to start my bachelor's with political science pre-law as my major. All was going well until one professor, an older man who hated me from day one. He saw this young blonde chick in his class, which, let's be real, was an easy and basic prereq at a community college, and decided I wasn't worth his time. He would constantly answer any of my questions condescendingly, and in an effort make me feel dumb, he would call on me to answer questions on material he hadn't taught yet. Finally, at the end of the semester, he handed back my final paper and decided to have a talk with me after the rest of the class left. He told me that maybe politics law wasn't the thing for me, and that maybe I should look into doing something different. Joke's on him though, I ended up completing my major and working as main staff on a major campaign during 2012. Then after all that fun, I decided I didn't want to go to law school and I now work for the govt. So still, frick that dude. I did get put in the sorg pit for misbehaviors. Perhaps sorged is not the English word. It was the worst time for my life. Singapore school system was horrible. I had a teacher bring a knife to school and threatened me with it as a joke. He didn't get any reprimand to my knowledge and I hated going to class for the rest of the year. I wasn't removed from the class since it was the only advanced Spanish class. If they hadn't been witnesses, I would have thought I'd dreamed it. I had a teacher in 8th grade who obviously didn't like me. She was awful. I was kind of having a hard time fitting in and getting emotionally bullied. Then my parents got a divorce, and I admit I was off at times and it probably showed that I took it out on other students. So before class started, I was goofing off with other children and she turned at me and said, "You realize nobody likes you, right?" I was taken back and just kind of reinforced what I already knew, that I didn't and probably would never fit in. What the frick? My senior year of high school, my mental health took a steep dive. I was dealing with a lot of instability at home. One of my closest friends had become a relentless antagonistic bully to me, and the only thing that made me feel better was playing bass guitar in the jazz band class. Or it was, until our band teacher left. The replacement, Mrs. Rath, was just terrible. I think she tried, but she was not good. My bully ran that class and Rath encouraged it. My bass guitar skills weren't good enough, so I ended up being banished to play Triangle and Jingle Bells. It's a small miracle I didn't kill myself throughout that year, because Lord knows I wanted to. I'll never forget the day she asked us our opinions on a specific piece we were playing, which was objectively horrible. She called on me and I said that I didn't like it. She then yelled at me for being negative and being the worst member of the band until I cried. Fortunately, that was not long. She made me play songs faster and harder until I permanently scarred the tendons in both of my wrists. And whenever my bully decided to lash out at me, Mrs. Rath would watch and laugh. So yeah, Kathy, frick you. I'm glad you got banished to elementary school teaching. I hope I never see you again. Step on Legos for the rest of your life. This reminds me of the movie Whiplash when J.K. Simmons' character rages on the kid when he can't stay perfectly on beat. Starting in sophomore year of HS, every Valentine's Day I would get a secret admirer card in my locker. Being an idiot high school girl, I was super flattered and my friends and I would try and wring our brains to figure out who it was. Finally, come senior year, I get another sweet admirer card, except this year it is sent to my home address and, instead of being handwritten, is typed out and pasted onto the card, with the lyrics from one of my teacher's favorite Bob Dylan songs, Simple Twist of Fate. So turns out my secret admirer all throughout high school was in fact one of my teachers. On top of the secret admirer cards, the day after I graduated he started texting me telling me to get drunk for pillow talk. No thanks, buddy. Idiot high school girl. Yeah, how dare you assume that your secret admirer is in your age group instead of some creepy perv authority figure. Frick, that's insidious. I'm glad you're okay. Friend thought he was funny. We were sitting with one of our teachers. He was a TA, and he decided to show me a new handshake. Go to slap his hand only for him to move it last second, resulting in me slapping this teacher's butt. Frick off, Marshall. I had some mental health issues developing and spent a lot of time out of class with the well-being staff. When someone asked where I was one day, the teacher, who I previously looked up to and had confided in, decided to tell everyone that I was doing terribly and needed help. When I confronted him and said, "Dude, what the frick?" he said he thought it would help so people would be gentle. I do believe he had good intentions, but it did not fricking help. I had a teacher who found out I was B and refused to let anyone sit in the seat next to me at my table. It wasn't like I was in the back of the class, I was dead center front row, and she said it out loud to the class. I hope that teacher got fired. Teacher accused me of being a bad kid, cheating on tests, having ADHD. I made good grades, didn't cheat, went to a psychologist just to tell her for a fact I didn't have ADD. I was just an admittedly over-talkative and energetic kid, and it wasn't like I was wheeling in my wheelchair to the back of the playground and smoking crack or something. I was a 3rd grader. Lol, she told me to shut up. I had a religion teacher in high school named Mr. Nguyen, who was working on becoming a Jesuit priest and was a really cool guy. He always had a smile on his face and did his best to make class a fun experience for everyone. There was a kid in my class who was a really annoying smart butt, but Mr. Nguyen was always really patient with him, until one day he pushed him too far. I forgot exactly what the kid said, but it definitely crossed the line. Mr. No Yen slammed his fists on his desk and shouted, "Why can't you ever shut the frick up?" He then picked up his stapler and chucked it at the kid, missing his head by a few inches and leaving a huge dent in the wall, and then stormed out into the hallway. Even though I wasn't the one that got the stapler chucked at him, that was still something crazy to experience. I had never seen a teacher blow up like that, and I definitely never expected it from him. My family moved from the north to Florida when I was going into the 5th grade. My teacher, for some reason, thought this shy, awkward, small town girl needed to be toughened up, basically hazed, by the class. I was so badly teased and isolated that I've blacked out my entire 5th grade from my memory. My mom, who actually worked at his school, said I came home crying every day. She was an underling and tried, but failed, to get me switched to another class. I ended up becoming tougher only after we moved away from that crap hole. Parenting pro tip: the keys are not a good place to raise children, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and frick you, Mr. Colson. Well, I once had a teacher who would read our test scores in front of the entire class. In the same school, I also had a teacher grab my friend by the ear and pull really hard. His ear was red and hurt the rest of the day. I had a teacher who, when she went around giving tests back to students, would call out every grade as she handed it to the student. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.